Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into a topic that I think is super relevant to all of us, online media manipulation. And to guide us through this, we have Ryan Holiday's book, Trust Me, I'm Lying, Confessions of a Media Manipulator.
Yeah, this book is a real eye-opener. And what makes it even more fascinating is that Holiday is a former media manipulator himself. So he's not just talking theory, he's actually been in the trenches, pulling the strings, so to speak.
Exactly. He's going to give us this behind-the-scenes look at how easy it can be to manipulate what we see online. And honestly, it's a little unsettling, but before we get into the consequences of all this, let's start with the mechanics. How does this stuff actually work?
Well, Holiday talks about this tactic he calls trading up the chain.
Okay, trading up the chain. What's that all about?
So imagine you stumble upon a story on some, small, kind of obscure blog. It's about, some crazy corporate scandal or a celebrity doing something outrageous, and the story's just, too perfect.
Right, almost too good to be true.
Well, that's often by design. Holiday says he used to plant these kind of fake stories on these smaller blogs, almost like seeds.
So how does that work? How does a story on some random blog end up going viral or becoming actual news?
Well, you got to remember that bigger blogs and news sites are always hungry for content. They need stuff to publish to keep people coming back.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, they're not as careful as they should be about checking their sources.
So they just see a juicy story on a smaller blog and they run with it.
Pretty much. And then, because this bigger, more reputable site has now linked to it, the story suddenly seems more credible, even if it's totally bogus.
So it's almost like this chain reaction, right? It starts small and just keeps growing and growing.
Exactly. It goes
Oh.
from blogs to websites and then bam.
Yeah.
It might even end up on a major news network. Each step up the chain makes the story seem more legit, even though it started as like a total fabrication.
And no one along the way is really fact-checking. How did Holiday get away with this for so long?
Well, he knew how to exploit the system, right? He understood what he calls the link economy of the internet.
Link economy?
Yeah, think about it. When you see a blog post with a bunch of links to sources, it makes you think, oh, this must be well-researched. Right.
Yeah, like they've actually got evidence to back up what they're saying.
Exactly. But a lot of times, those links were just going to other blogs that are part of the same manipulation network. It's this closed loop of misinformation.
So it's all fake, but it looks legit because of the links. That's
Oh.
crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And Holiday has this crazy example of how this almost led to CNN reporting a totally made-up story about American Apparel's hiring practices.
American Apparel, that company was always in the news for something, right?
Right. So it all started with this anonymous email sent to Gawker. And because of this link economy we're talking about, this totally fake email almost became national news.
Wow, just one email. It's kind of scary how quickly something like that could snowball, you know?
Yeah, it really makes you think twice about, what you believe online.
It really does. I mean, I consider myself a pretty savvy internet user, but I've got to admit, I never really thought about how easily this stuff could happen.
And it's not just about spreading fake news. It's about shaping the whole narrative, the way we see the world.
Right, and it seems like the internet's speed, this need for constant content, it just makes things worse.
Oh, absolutely. Bloggers are under this intense pressure to publish new stuff all the time.
Yeah.
They need to keep those clicks coming. And that means they're often more focused on being first than being accurate.
Right, like getting the scoop, even if it's not totally accurate. But, I mean, is it really just about getting more traffic? I mean, why else would bloggers be so quick to jump on these, questionable stories?
Well, traffic is definitely a big part of it, right? More traffic means more ad revenue, which is how most blogs make money. But Holiday also talks about this concept he calls iterative journalism.
Iterative journalism, what's that?
It's basically this idea that you publish first and verify later. You get the story out there as quickly as possible, and then if it turns out to be wrong, you can always issue a correction later.
But doesn't that just create a cycle of, misinformation? You put something false out there, and even if you correct it later, the damage is kind of already done.
Oh, absolutely. But for the blogger, it's a calculated risk, right? The potential reward of going viral often outweighs the risk of having to issue a correction later.
So, in a way, the internet's need for speed is actually making us less informed. We're getting all this information, but it's not always reliable.
That's a great way to put it. And this creates a perfect environment for marketers and PR people who know how to play the game.
Right, they can manipulate the system to their advantage. And speaking of manipulation, Holiday was also, a master of using humor and snark to control the media narrative.
Oh, yeah. He was great at that. He'd often use humor to deflect negative stories about his clients, Make a joke, turn the whole thing into a meme, and suddenly everyone's focused on the humor instead of the actual issue.
So humor can be a tool for manipulation too, huh?
Absolutely, it's super effective. And while, like, snark and satire can be entertaining, they can also be used to distract from, serious problems.
Just like when someone makes a joke to avoid taking responsibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Holiday uses this great example from Gawker. They were constantly, like, mocking people like Dov Charney from American Apparel and the author Tucker Max. You know those guys?
Yeah, they were always in the news for something or
All
other.
right. So Gawker's always making fun of them. But then, get this, they invite both of these guys to their Fleshbot Awards. It's basically like an awards show for porn, right?
Wait, so they were making fun of these guys and simultaneously, like, profiting off them.
Yep. It just shows the, like, hypocrisy, the double standard of a lot of this online stuff. Sometimes the snark and outrage are just a performance,
Yeah.
just a way to get attention and clicks.
So we're starting to see a pattern here, right? The internet speed, this need for constant content, the way links can create a false sense of authority, it all creates this perfect storm for manipulation.
It's like the Wild West out there. And as we're going to see in part 2, the consequences of all this manipulation, they can be pretty far-reaching. It's not just about spreading false info, it's about shaping our perceptions of reality itself.
Okay, so we've talked about how easy it is for like misinformation to spread online. But now I'm kind of curious about the impact all of this has. Like, it can't just be about spreading fake news. What are the like real consequences of this unreality you mentioned?
Yeah, one of the most disturbing aspects is how blogs can be used for public shaming and punishment. It's like the internet's this modern-day coliseum where individuals are just thrown to the lions, for the entertainment of the masses.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like every day there's this new cancellation happening online.
Exactly. Holiday calls this the degradation ceremony.
Mm.
It's like this ritualistic process where someone is publicly denounced and, like, expelled from the group.
Oh, wow. So it's like a modern day witch hunt.
Yeah, in a way. Have you ever, like, seen someone getting canceled online? Think about it. Was it really fair? Was there any, like, due process? Or was it just like this mob mentality taking over?
That's a good point. I mean, sometimes it feels like people are just piling on without even knowing all the facts.
And that's the danger of this whole degradation ceremony thing. It often strips people of their, like, nuance and just reduces them to a caricature of their worst moment.
Right, like one mistake and that's all anyone focuses on.
Exactly. And Holiday uses Julian Assange as an example, right? The WikiLeaks guy.
Yeah.
At first, he was hailed as this hero for, like, exposing government secrets. But then those allegations of sexual misconduct surfaced, and boom, he became like a total pariah.
Yeah, I remember that. It was all over the news.
And the blogosphere just went into overdrive, like tearing down his reputation, reducing him to a caricature.
Yeah, it's interesting how quickly public opinion can shift online. One minute you're a hero, the next you're like the villain. It makes you wonder if we're all just too quick to judge based on like limited information.
Right, and we don't even know if that information's accurate. It all ties into another big problem, this illusion of authority.
Illusion of authority. What do you mean by that?
Well, you see blogs using all this language of, like, traditional journalism, like sources, exclusives, breaking news, all that stuff. They're trying to present themselves as, like, having this insider knowledge and authority. But as we've seen, their standards are often way lower.
So they're basically pretending to be something they're not.
Exactly. It's this whole world of what Holiday calls abandoned shells. These words that, still have their traditional meaning, but have been kind of emptied of their substance in the online context.
Can you, like, give me an example of that?
Sure. Think about the word source. Like, in real journalism, a source is someone who's carefully vetted, whose information is, like, corroborated. But in the blogosphere, a source can be anything. An anonymous email, a random tweet. It's basically meaningless.
So we're being conditioned to trust these, like, cues, like the word source, even though they might not be reliable.
Exactly. And that makes us super vulnerable to manipulation. We're just, like, quick to believe what we read, especially if it's presented in a way that looks like traditional journalism.
So how does this constant exposure to, manipulation and misinformation, how does that actually affect us, like, psychologically? Is it really changing the way we see the world?
Oh, for sure. Think about it.
Yeah.
We're constantly bombarded with information 24/7.
Yeah.
And a lot of this information is, sensationalized, designed to trigger our emotions and keep us engaged.
It's like we're living in this constant state of, like, information overload.
Right. And our brains aren't really equipped to handle this kind of onslaught,
Yeah.
We start to lose our ability to tell the difference between what's real and what's just, like, made up.
So it's not just about the information itself, it's about the way our brains, like, process and interpret that information.
Exactly. And remember, our brains are wired to trust the written word, that's like built into us. For centuries, the written word has been this source of, knowledge and authority.
So basically, we're walking around with these brains that are primed to be manipulated by the very media we rely on for information. That's kind of scary.
It is a little bit. But the good news is that once we're aware of these tactics, we can start to protect ourselves.
So, okay, we've uncovered some pretty, like, disturbing stuff about how easy it is to manipulate information online. But knowing is half the battle, right? Like, what can we actually do to protect ourselves from all of this?
That's the question, isn't it? And luckily, Holiday doesn't just like leave us hanging, He actually offers some really practical advice on how to be a more savvy consumer of information online.
Okay, good. So, like, what's the first step? Where do we even start?
Well, the first step is really simple, actually. Question everything.
Question everything.
Yeah, like don't just take things at face value,
Yeah.
especially online, right? We're constantly being bombarded with stuff that's designed to, grab our attention, make us react.
So how do we do that? Like, I can't fact check every single thing I read. I don't have time for that.
You don't have to, I know. It's more about developing like a healthy sense of skepticism,
Yeah.
Start by paying attention to your gut. If a headline seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Right, like those clickbait headlines that are like, OMG, you won't believe this.
Exactly. Those are just designed to get you to, like, click without thinking.
Ah, I hate those.
And also, pay attention to the source. Is this a reputable organization, with a good track record? Or is it just some random blog with, like, a clear agenda?
So it's like that old saying, right? If your mother says she loves you, check it out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, exactly. Don't just rely on one source for your information. See if other, like, reputable outlets are reporting the same story. If it's just on one obscure blog, take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, so that's a good starting point, right? Be skeptical, check the source, look for other sources saying the same thing. But what if I want to, like, really dig deep and actually try to verify something myself? Are there any, like, tools or strategies I can use for that?
Oh, there's tons of great resources out there for fact-checking. You've got websites like Snopes and PolitiFact that specialize in like debunking viral rumors and misinformation. You can also do a reverse image search to see if a photo's been, taken out of context or even manipulated.
Oh, wow, those are great tips. I actually had no idea those resources existed. I'm definitely going to check those out. But sometimes it feels like even when we know something is fake, it just keeps spreading online anyway. It's like you can't stop the flow of misinformation.
Yeah, it can feel that way. That's why it's important to like be vocal about demanding better from
Yeah.
the media we consume,
So it's not just about being a skeptical reader, it's about actively like pushing for higher standards.
Exactly. We need to support those publications and journalists that, you know, actually prioritize accuracy and depth over just speed and sensationalism.
It's kind of like voting with our eyeballs and our wallets,
Right.
right?
Yeah. And don't be afraid to like call out misinformation when you see it, Share fact checks, leave comments, contact the publication directly. We have more power than we realize.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, if enough people start demanding better, maybe it'll actually force these websites and platforms to change their practices, right?
I think so. Remember, we're not just passive consumers of info, right? We have a choice in what we read, what we share, what we support.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the kind of dark side of online media manipulation. We've learned a lot today.
Definitely. We've seen how easy misinformation spreads, how it can be used to like manipulate us and even have real-world consequences. But the good news is we're not powerless against it.
Yeah, there are definitely steps we can take to like protect ourselves, be more critical of what we see online, do our own research, and demand better from the media we consume.
And that actually leads perfectly into a final thought I want to leave you with. This week, I challenge you to find a piece of content online that you disagree with. Read it carefully and try to spot any potential biases or any of those manipulation tactics we've been talking about. Then try to find some fact checks or like alternative perspectives on that same topic. See if your perspective changes at all.
Yeah, that's a great challenge. And remember, it's not about being right or wrong, right? It's about being informed and engaging with, the information that shapes our world in a thoughtful, critical way. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We